For the first time in the brief history of this channel, I'll talk about a movie, and not just any movie. I'll talk about The House. The House is a 2022 British adult stop-motion animated black comedy anthology film telling 3 different stories spanning different worlds, I suppose, and characters, but all set inside the same house. It's a black comedy that leaves you totally unsettled and restless, especially the first story. Stop-motion pictures always fascinated me, and among my favorites are Anomalisa and Coraline. Totally different, you know, in the spectrum of genres, but they kind of settled, and so did The House. For some reason, I can connect with stop-motion animation more than I can with other kinds of animation, or even with real people on screen. Is that weird? Nah, I think it's what makes me special. Lol. Cappuccino is noisy now in the other room. Can you hear him? Let's give him a moment. In the first story, the characters are real people, while in the second and third, well, not real people, just like humans. While in the second and in the third, we have animals, mostly anthropomorphic animals. And I say mostly because the second story is kind of tricky, and we'll get to that in just a second. And it was quite nice, you know, that we had animals for a change, and I think that's what gives me the sense that it's more like of the same house in a different world than in a different timeline. Although the stories kind of resemble, you know, time passing through the house, like the first story could take place in the past, the second like somewhat now in the present, and the third story takes place in a post-apocalyptic like future. But I still like get the sense that it's a different world. Anyway, the first and the second story, I also kind of like got them right away, while the third one troubled me, and I had to sit down the next day and write all my thoughts, and I filled like 6 pages with my thoughts, so I can kind of decode, you know, the metaphors of the third story. And I know maybe, you know, some are just clear-cut, or maybe, you know, the writers had something totally different in their minds, and I'm just like super analyzing it for no reason. But yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about today. All my analysis. I just wanted to make a video or 2 about my thoughts on this movie, and I cannot promise to keep it spoiler free, because if I'm gonna go in depth, there's got to have spoilers, so you know, I can't kind of express myself better. So in the first story, Mabel, a young girl, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be reading this because sometimes I tend to forget, like I'm gonna be talking about 3 different stories here, so forgive me. Okay, so in the first story we have Mabel, a young girl who lives with her parents and her newborn sister Isabel, and they live in relative poverty. So in this story we follow Mabel as her family move into a grand, like luxurious house, let's skip that word for later. After her father makes a deal with some mysterious figure whose name is Van Schoonbeek, I think. I don't even remember how to pronounce this. After being mocked by his wealthy relatives. After moving in, Mabel starts noticing several peculiar things about the house, and also about the constructors who keep changing the house. They keep refitting it according to Fan Shunbik's orders. But the parents seem too mesmerized by the house to notice anything strange. As time passes, the parents become increasingly aloof, seemingly caring more about the luxuries than the well-being of their own children. They care more about the grand house and the lavish furnishings and everything. The father even obsesses with the fireplace that he cannot seem to light for whatever reason. And the mother spends all her time sewing, to a point that she just passes out. Mabel seems to be the only one who notices that the layout of the house keeps changing, nonsensically, of course. And she and her sister are the only ones who remain sane, even though the sister is just newborn, I suppose. Maybe she's not really newborn, maybe she's just a developed baby, because she can crawl and she can jump and she can, at some point she starts talking. So I don't know how old the baby is. The weirdest part was when the parents started wearing some attire that resembled furniture designed especially for them by Fan Shunbik. He made attire that resembled the furniture they loved. So the father was dressed as a chair, while the mother was dressed as drapes, curtains. The story ends with Mabel's parents being turned into pieces of furniture. The furniture they were actually wearing, they become it. Which is so creepy. While Mabel and Isabel manage to escape the burning building unharmed. The main theme I gather in this story is greed. Coming from a poor background and being constantly mocked for it, Mabel's parents are lured by the idea of being able to live comfortably without having to work for it. They could now live in a luxurious house that they could have never been able to afford otherwise. They accept a deal from a person they know nothing about. He controls them and he manipulates them to a point where they get to be part of the house themselves, turning into furniture. They are now the house. And having been amazed by all this luxury, they seem to care more about that than ensuring the safety of their own children. I know I'm repeating myself, I'm just trying to make a point. The atmosphere in this story is so dark. I would have sworn it was a horror film if I didn't know it was a dark comedy. It was so well delivered, and yeah, I thought I was watching a horror movie. The most memorable the most memorable part of the story, however, is at some point where Mabel looks out the window and sees their old house being destroyed. And she says something like, "That's our house," which kind of stayed with me, because even though they no longer live there, to her, that's her house. That's what she feels, to be her home, actually. So that's, the old house is their home and the new house is just a house. But we'll get to that later. I think everything just, comes to pieces in the end after we talk about all the stories. The second story is set in a world where we have anthropomorphic rats, and the house is about to go up for sale, and the protagonist in this story is a developer who is working on renovating the house so he can sell it and he's also struggling financially. Let's just keep that in mind. So his future depends on selling the house. So as he starts the renovation, he soon discovers that the house is full of bugs and larvae. Ugh. He takes extreme measures to get rid of them, but fails. So on the day of the viewing, the guests are unimpressed by the house. And although the viewing ends in complete disaster and no one seems interested in purchasing it, there's this strange couple that show interest, like out of the blue. So he was not willing to risk the sale of the house, so he obliged by their strange behavior and he lets them stay the night. And over the next few days, the couple remains at the house and the bugs return too. And there's this kind of like psychedelic scene where all the bugs and the larvae are dancing. It was so weird. And on the other hand, the bank keeps calling him, you know, for the loan. So the strange couple start inviting their family over, which is so weird. But the weirdest thing of all is that it's revealed that every single one of them, like the couple themselves and their families, have this kind of weird body shape. And they're shaped as bugs and larvae. Like half of them have like several limbs and half of them have like very long, like, ugh, oh my god. So the developer snaps and he threatens to kill them, to poison them, but instead he poisons himself. Okay, and ends up at the hospital. He survives, and at the end, the odd couple picks him up from the hospital and they bring him home. And the entire family throws him a welcome back party. Okay, so the final scene of the story of this film shows the family raging the inside of the house, you know, climbing up the walls and chewing on everything. And the developer himself, having regressed to animal-like intelligence, is seen briefly, you know, to come out of the remains of an oven. He chews some garbage and then he retrieves back into the oven. So in some way or another, he becomes like them. It seems as this film, the second one, serves as a reminder not to ignore lingering problems like the bugs in this situation, but as a metaphor for mental health. Mental health issues shouldn't be ignored by delving into work, as that could lead to more serious problems down the road. It also touches on the themes of loneliness and the need to belong somewhere, since the developer doesn't seem to have any family members or friends himself. Occasionally he speaks on the phone with someone he calls darling and such, but we find out later that he was talking to his dentist, who later sent the police at his place because he was harassing them. Apparently he had no one else to talk to, and he ended up calling his dentist every time he needed to speak to someone, which he also didn't seem to realize it was wrong. When the family of rats welcomed him home after his trip to the hospital, he was at a vulnerable state, mentally and physically, to resist the urge to be with other like-minded creatures. The need to belong to a group, no matter how destructive that group may be. And that's how cults are born. And finally, the second film compares to the movie Parasite. if you think about it, in Parasite, all people that reside inside the house, no matter their economical class or social status, they all are parasites of society at one point or another. If you haven't watched the movie, I highly recommend it. So similarly, in this film, in this house, from the bugs to the odd-shaped rats to the developer, they all are parasites at one point or another. And I think that's demonstrated perfectly by giving these weird rats, the couple and their family, the body shapes of bugs and larvae. While at the same time, the developer was trying to get rid of the actual bugs in the house. And in the end, after trying to get rid of both the bugs and the rats, he ends up becoming like them. He starts to behave like them. He doesn't, like, his body doesn't change, but he behaves like them. So I'm gonna stop this here. That's for part 1. So come back in 2 weeks from now. I will be talking about the 3rd part and some like general thoughts about the entirety of the movie in my next video, which I'll probably upload it the week after. So come back then if you want, and I'll see you. Bye bye.